when I was younger, I used to explode. In other words, I didn't have any tolerance to, to an argument, I would say,
I think mom
or
agrees.
mommy agrees.
Little tolerance.
I would say I was born with zero tolerance.
Hello.
Hello, how is everybody
We all
today?
look so nice for the topic that we're going to talk about today, which
Very summary.
very summery, very bright, very happy. So what we're going to talk about today, we've been talking about different things that happen to us as we age. And we had a conversation about how our friendships change as we age. And at the tail end of the conversation, I think, Mom, you said something that triggered this, which is that a normal part of friendships continues to be managing conflict. And conflict can bring up lots of thoughts like a big fight. It could just be disagreements. But regardless, yes, it's still a part of our friendships and relationships. But I am curious how it changes over time, if that also looks different. As we talked about friendships being more intentional and more selective and having quality relationships with our friends, perhaps the process of fighting also changes. So that is the plan for today. And we'll look at our own experiences as we've over time seen how this process changes for us. Does that sound good?
Very good.
Very good.
Okay.
Nice
So first,
subject.
it's a good topic. It's an important topic, I think, because I don't want people to think that, as you age, sure, things change and maybe we feel our friendships are more quality, that means disagreements go away. That's not the case. In fact, I think that's the sign of a healthy relationship, right? Because if you can be individuals in a relationship, which means you each have your own opinions, then naturally we also come in with different experiences. We may have different opinions about things, and it's healthy to discuss those. And we're going to talk about fighting styles in a little bit, but I did want to give some other background information that might help us understand if things change, why they may change. So first I was thinking about anger. Does anger change for us as we age, the experience of anger? And there's like mixed research about it. There was a Psychology Today article that said, in general, right? We have to be careful when we say in general because there's still exceptions. As we grow older, we experience fewer negative emotions, we experience more happiness, and we have more tools to regulate our emotions so that we can not go to extremes, like maybe as much as we did when you were younger. However, of course, there's exceptions to this. Some people say they feel they're just as angry or sometimes even more angry than they were in their youth. And some of the things that might influence that include things like losses, whether that's loss of loved ones, loss of physical abilities, loss of home, loss of job, right? When you, even if it's voluntary, you retire, you lose that routine. A social isolation for some, and chronic pain that comes with some of the physical changes, cognitive changes which happen, including, on the more extreme ends, Alzheimer's and dementia can lead to impulse control issues, which influences how we might argue. Hormonal changes also for both men and women. In women, that might mean mood changes, mood swings. In men, that might mean irritability. And of course, any of these changes can impact feelings of depression, which can be expressed sometimes as anger and irritability. The balance to the anger piece is our personality and how personality can change. And one model says there's the big five personality traits. And amongst them is agreeableness and conscientiousness. And again, research is mixed, but in general, as we get older, there's a sense that we are more agreeable and we're more conscientious. And compared to our youth, we might consider that we're more emotionally stable. And so those things can also positively influence how we have disagreements. So that's some of the background. I now want to go into one model around what the typical fighting styles are. And as I go through these, maybe kind of figure out which style you lean towards, and if that's the way you've always been, or you think it has shifted as you've aged. So one model says there's 5 main fighting styles. One is competitive, which is what it sounds like. The goal is for you to be right, the other person to be wrong, which of course makes the other person feel horrible, right? Because they're completely dismissed. The other is avoiding, which in our minds we might think is good for the other person, right? Because we're just not going to have an argument. But the problem is still there. And so then it festers and it grows. So the next time it gets triggered, it may not be so good. Accommodating, which is leaning more towards giving into the other person, which again might feel like, okay, it's good. It'll resolve the problem. The other person will feel good about it. But it also means you're putting your needs to the side, and that can build resentment. Then there is a compromising. Compromising is like negotiating, right? It's like a 50-50. We meet in the middle, right, in terms of where we disagree. And it feels better than the other styles, but it could still end up not addressing root issues underneath the disagreement, because the goal is resolution and a feeling that each person's leaving with something, right, out of the argument. And then the last one is collaborating, which is thought to be the more effective style, which is where you allow yourselves to have a more in-depth conversation about even strong emotions tied to the argument, root issues beneath the argument. And in the end, both people can feel heard, and resolution feels good for both of the people involved, or all the people involved if it's more than 2 people. So those are the main fighting styles. And listening to that, I'm sure you have a sense of which one you're more prone to use, and to think, have I always been that way? Has it changed over time? So now I want to hear a little bit about your personal experiences. So the first question is, what is your primary fighting style? Do you feel it's changed over time? For example, do you think you let go of some things more easily? Are you more direct when you disagree? And I will start with Aunt Lauda.
Very interesting. Well, of course, over the time you start changing, right? And when you are younger, like in my case, when I was younger, I used to explode. In other words, I didn't have any tolerance to, to an argument, I would say,
I think Mom
or
agrees.
mommy agrees.
Little tolerance.
I would say I was born with zero tolerance, which is really bad. Over the years, you start learning and you say, you know what, it's terrible. It's actually terrible because you lose a lot of nice people around you. And you always, you always would be, having these arguments, even little arguments for anything. So yes, of course I have changed. Thank God. I have changed a lot, because the time and the years and the experience will teach you different things, right? So yes, when I have an argument, maybe with the same people, with my friends, I would say, let's start with my friends. When we were really young, we really got into a fight that we stopped talking to each other, things like that. And nowadays, we can argue. We can, I have a particular one friend that probably she will hear us in the podcast, that all the time she thinks she's right, or she reads a lot and she have the argument, I don't know. But the thing is that I don't know who's right or who's wrong, that we're different people. So yes, there is a background that you can certify that this is right, what I'm saying, right? You have to be flexible. This is my point right now. You have to be flexible. When you have your feelings hurt, yes, you have to say it, right? And be straightforward. Be straightforward to the person, with a kindness, not be aggressive like I used to. For instance, when you explode, and especially when you let this drop, filling the glass, and then it is the last drop, of course everything is going to go away. And I used to be like that. And I used to be in my marriage. And that's terrible. That's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I regret those things, but now I try to do it different.
Yeah. And we're going to circle back to if you have the sense that your friends, especially longer term friends, have picked up on how you've changed over time and how they've responded to that. But first, we'll go to Mom and ask you the same question. Do you think your fighting style has changed over time?
Oh, definitely. In the different way of Tia Laura. First of all, forgive my allergies are really bad this morning.
Oh.
When I was younger, like the song goes, when I was young, there was what you called existentialist cafes. And it was, very interesting. It was maybe the early middle 60s.
Is that where they did this?
Was that?
They would snap when they would read poetry and stuff?
Oh,
No.
yeah, they were
Oh,
exactly. There was poetry,
okay.
music. A musician would come in, play the guitar, the flute, whatnot. And there were discussions, actually. There was discussions that were so interesting, political, religious, philosophy, literature, you name it. And those are the things we should not touch because I would feel passionate about something that meant a lot to me. And I do recall there was discussions, there was conflict actually. In being young, had you take everything like this is it. That is a point that is the most change as you grow old. Because number one, you see a situation that you say, I have been in something like this before. And it's not really that extremely important to cause conflict, for example. But then I go the other way around. I've always been, I guess it's my temperament. It has to be, I don't know. Or, you learn at home. But I have a tendency to let go, to be more in the styles you said, like accommodating, especially if there was something that was not really that important to me. Sure, whatever. But there were times with very dear friends that there would be a little bit of that personality or style of I have to be right and you're wrong. And if we take it and take it through the years I learned, you come to the logical situation to say, you know what, I don't really want to get together. It's always the same thing. Until I learned or I changed through the years, well, speak clearly. You don't have to be, harsh, but speak clearly what you think. And because it's worth it to keep your friends, your good friends. And there are going to be differences, like Laura was saying, because we have different temperaments, characters, and so on. So I think through the years, I have learned in a way to be more mellow in things that would get me very upset or frustrated before. And then as we grow old, also you have all the, how do you say, the pains, the little pains of aging, pains here and there. And other things become more important than what we are discussing here, a TV, the news, a TV commentary that no, you're absolutely wrong. Well, is you see it one way or see it another, and it's easier to agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, as you both are talking, I get this sense of like, how do fights feel in your body too? And I think and I'll say I was very much like Aunt Lauda. I think as I went through adolescence and then onward, I was very quick to anger, as very full of rage. And I think there's moments that I still tap into that a little bit, but I think little things would set me off. And the feeling of it was I couldn't come down very easily. And it felt ugly in my body because I would be exhausted after. And you can feel as you get angry, right? You feel your body get hot and even shaking sometimes. And I think over time, and I think a part of that too, because we talked about you mentioned Mom, like where does that come from? Is that your upbringing or what you've observed in terms of how you disagree with people? And I think for me, there was this feeling of Being silenced for a long time and then wanting to make sure my voice was heard. And I think that was behind a lot of it. Like, I have needs too. And I think that always trumped a healthy disagreement. It was like, you have to hear me loud and clear that this is upsetting me, right? I think over time, learning to empathize with people, try to hear their side, what their needs are. And like you say, Mom, to clearly communicate what my needs are. I don't have to yell about it. I don't have to fight aggressively about it. Then a balance came in where it sort of shifted more into compromise and then eventually collaborating. But like I said, there's still times, especially if it's a recurring thing or something I can't control, even, that I think it taps into my rage a little bit because I've seen it before. I've seen this pattern before, or it's something that I can't change necessarily, and it's hard for me to still let go of those things. So I can sometimes flip very quickly too. So, and I think that's an important piece in terms of people listening to their bodies, because like you said, Mom, I think what clicked for me was when you said, as you get older, there's other things you start going through, and the idea of preserving your energy, preserving your body is a big part of that. In addition to, and we talked about this in the friendship conversation, but in other conversations, quality of life, right? What do I want to yell and scream and take some quality of my life away? Or is there another option here, right? And we're going to talk about tips at the end for people to think about and start to implement if they feel they're one of those who is quick to argue versus the pausing and really listening for what is the other person really saying they need? What do I need? And can we actually have a healthy conversation about that? But I want to get back to when you did notice your style changing. I'm sure your friends noticed the change and people that you interact with. So I'm curious how they responded to the way you've changed how you handle disagreements. And so I'll come back to Aunt Lauda.
Well, I remember, especially when I was working under pressure, under stress. In my work was actually stress work that I have to go, I have to be in the connected all the time when I was working. I was working at the airport and everything is rushing. So I remember back on all those days, of course, I was very I didn't have no tolerance and I exploded very easily, especially when you're in charge of something to go right, when you have an operation undergoing. Or so my friends nowadays that I see quite often, and we get together and everything, now that I'm retired, now that things have changed in my life, of course they mention, wow, you are really in a good place now, Laura, right? Because I see you very calm. And of course, when you have these good habits, I would say, when you meditate, when you breathe, you're breathing, and then honestly, when you accept the real life, because there's things that you cannot change, right? So things that, and so when I get along with them, especially with those friends that I got, that I got involved in so many years with the stress job, they actually tell me that I'm totally, I'm very smooth and I'm easy to talk. And some of them, they give, they tell me that I have, that I give them good advices and things like that. And my very close friends, that I have seen forever, of course, they see me different. And there is something when you have, like my family, when you are very attached to them, you are you, right? You cannot hide how your character is. So when you have something that really bothers you, you have to say it. Yeah, but you say it in a different way. And yes, they have noticed that I don't explode that easy.
That's
Yeah.
good. And do you find that maybe even some of your longer term friends who maybe have noticed some of the shift for you, do you think it's influenced them in terms of how they engage in disagreements with you? Do they seem more relaxed or not really?
Yes, they do. I would say mostly all of them. They feel more relaxed with me. And I notice when they talk to a very important subject, I would say a very personal subject, when you get along to that at that point, and of course they have a way of thinking, what is right or what is wrong, and then we're different people. But I can see that, yes, they notice and they connect with me easier, and they respect that part. And I see them different as well. They have changed too.
How about you, Mom, as you've shifted your way of having disagreements, how have you seen others respond to you?
Well, very well, because it's important to be open, to be clear without hurting others. Sometimes I have comments that may be, too harsh, um, like when we saw a program, like I was saying, or a commentary or a situation, and then we have to realize that, like Laura says, each one of us has different points of view, and respect that. But I think they have realized that now I can tell more comfortably something I want to do or something I don't really want to do than before. Because before, and I don't know if that is besides your temperament, in conflict, how you were educated. Like, for example, you have to take this, or you have to be quiet, or don't say that, because then, that's not a really good manners, and really has nothing to be with manners, because like even you were saying, Joanna, that you keep it inside, you keep it silence inside. And the day you're going to make a comment, I think we have said this before in talking about relationships, is going to come out not very nice. So it's better to do it calmly. And that's one of the changes I think I have had. I'm less, what would it be, tense, because I start thinking, I'm going to have to say, what I think. I'm sorry if I hurt you, but do it in a way you don't hurt the other person. However, like we were saying, you have to kind of put certain boundaries, and express your opinion. And the good thing about a good friend, the good thing is that they accept you as you are. And we're going to be different, but agree to disagree. And I think they have noticed that. And we all feel we're not, too many friends, but the friends I have, the friends we feel more comfortable that way. There's nothing like talking clearly but firmly.
Yeah, and each person having a voice in the situation too. And I think I'm more intrigued by your transition because, like you said, it's different from me and Aunt Lauda. I think we were very loud, and then we learned to sort of settle down a little bit. And it actually gives other people more space to say what they want to say, right? Whereas yours is sort of the reverse, where you were more quiet and now you're asserting yourself and clearly stating your opinions and your needs in situations. And it sounds like overall your friends have appreciated that and are welcoming it. But I would imagine there was a shift the first times you were practicing that new style, right?
Oh, yes, yes, because I would have to say, I mean, for example, in where a group, four or so friends, and we three or four, we decided what restaurant to go and eat, for example, and then one would come out, well, I don't like the food there, and that person had the chance to choose a restaurant. So I would feel before, well, that's okay, I can go to any restaurant, and others will say, wait a minute, we all agree to this restaurant, you'll have your chance. These minimal things that when they're adding up, it's just not your opinion, we are several others. And I learned to say, well, yeah, I'm going to speak out and say, we really want to go here, or, whatnot. And in this example, many other examples, I began to speak out because you cannot say yes all the time when you don't really want to do something, or you have your own, you defend your point of view, and you need to be clear and direct. And that's some of the things that I wasn't before. So that's a change they have seen, and actually they respect it.
And I think before, Anna, you probably keep all this frustration and of course, the next meeting that you had with them or the next get together, you were probably not as normal or as easygoing because you have
Yeah.
that feeling hurt, right?
You keep too much, and number one, Joanna will tell you from her professional point of view, that's not healthy. Because
Yeah,
number
exactly.
one, you're going to explode for something that really is not that important, and
Yes.
others you cannot all the time is not healthy. You have to say, this is my opinion, and if you consider that I'm wrong and you're right, well, I'm sorry, but that's my opinion.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's nothing like feel also sure of yourself and move certain, not taboos, but how would you say, guidelines we had. No, you cannot say certain things. Well, you don't want to be disrespectful or intentionally hurt someone, but I think we need to be clear. So many misunderstandings, because if you don't tell your friends, for that matter anyone, they don't know, they cannot guess what you're thinking.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly. And just like I said, rage can take a toll on your body, so can holding things in because it's a tension in your body too to contain it until, like you said, something small happens and you can't contain it anymore. And that's your body's way of saying, I have to release this tension. Like I can't just keep holding and holding, right? The cup overflows and that's it. So it's good to hear there's been progression and growth in the way that you both now handle disagreements. I'm curious if there's still something that you feel you need to work on. And I'll start with Aunt Lauda.
Oh, yes, yes. And it gets me really a hard time. When I get mad, I would say, when I get mad to someone, and probably would be my first example, my son, the closest person that I have. Sometimes I'm so mad that I'm not listening, right? What they have to say. And even if they explain the situation or they whatever, I'm not listening because I have a point of view and this is what it is, period. So, I need to work on that. Again, I have to, breathe in, breathe out. And actually I'm doing it more often, but you just have to stop, sit down and like we were saying, mind focus, right? Where I am, who am I talking to, and what are we talking about?
Mhm.
Is this important? It's not, I mean, how important it is for you to be really 100% putting attention to it. So yes, that's what I'm working right now. And sometimes I do it and sometimes I still, fail. But yeah,
It's a
it's important.
practice. I mean,
It's
I
a
think
practice.
first thing is awareness and then is practice. And over time, it becomes easier and easier. But that's a good one. How about you, Mom? Something you think you still need to work on?
Oh, yes, because many a time when I insist, and it's not so much insistence or being hard-headed or anything like that, but when I speak out on anything, and I can say, I'm not going to get together. I feel tired. I had too many things yesterday. I'm going to relax. Maybe next week. Something as simple as that I would say, oh, okay, well, let's get together when I really didn't feel like it for the same reason with age and whatnot. Things are slower sometimes, and you really need, to relax and do it and rest. But one of the things I have to work in is not feeling guilty, because then after I say something or I decide something and I, set my point of view or what I think or what I'm going to do or I'm not going to do, sometimes I'll feel guilty. Well, you could have gone, no, 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 no. You needed this time for yourself. That's okay.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I would say, I mean, I kind of said this earlier, there's still some things that tap into that deep rage for me, and a lot of it has to do with things I can't control. And so I think I talked about this in a previous one, zooming out, seeing the bigger picture. And it's a balance of zooming out but being present and also empathizing with the other person a little bit more. And that refocuses my attention a little bit to really think through before I react, right? And so that's something I'm still working on. Now, we hinted at some of the tips, and I think, Aunt Lauda, you called out some really good ones, which is meditation, relaxation skills to really help you calm down. Because I think it's really that once you're upset about something, difference of opinion or whatever, it can make you angry, right? But it's about being able to control and stabilize strong emotions. And so meditation is a great way to do that. I think also self-reflection and really processing for yourself, what is it you want to say, what is it you need, and to, like you said, Mom, speak very clearly about what you need in the situation. If loss is a factor, if you're grieving something and so you're just generally in a more irritated state, making sure we give ourselves the space to grieve appropriately, right? Whether that's a loss of a person or a situation, really giving yourself the time to do that appropriately. Exercise is a great way also to regulate your emotions, besides chemically how it changes your body. It's a routine to really help with that emotional stability. And of course, professional help. If you find yourself frequently irritated or angry and it's playing out in your relationships, then certainly professional help is a great way to learn how to manage those things, right? Anything you would add to that?
Yeah, because it's funny at this point, from my point of view of, being old, uh, sometimes I think in the past, with friends, even with family, why did I get mad about that? Why was it a conflict when it was a situation we could have talked about, or really didn't matter that it had to be read, or, whatever the situation. And that's one of the things that we change, I think, with age, that you begin to have another perspective. Why? Because many things that you thought were that important at the time, you realize now. That's where the thing comes that, with age comes wisdom, because more than anything is the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like some people would say, choose your battles, because there are things that not really that worth it. Others, yeah, you have to stand for your beliefs. That's something we have talked as friends and even family. You have to stand for your beliefs. And if you are a person of faith, don't apologize for that. Just be and live honestly. And yeah, not everything needs to be a conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it is really safe and when you not going anywhere, when you're arguing with someone that thinks he's right or the person has the truth, I would say, and like you said, there is one of the status, right, that you can concern. I don't remember which one is that, but you just step back, and let's quit it here. Let's have it a call and let's go home and separate on that, because some people, they're really stubborn and think that they have the truth and the right, and they're not going to change you,
Yeah,
right?
knowing
Because
when to disconnect, right? And say, let's
exactly,
just
when you
maybe we
can
just leave it
disconnect.
here. It's not worth that energy. Which brings me to something that you found, Aunt Lauda, that I'll read out for our listeners to keep in mind too as they proceed and move forward with negotiating differences of opinion with people. Your energy is sacred. Learn to quietly withdraw from pointless arguments and people who disturb your peace. And I think that's a great way to end this, because at the end of the day, even as we talked about changing relationships and friendships over time, it's about quality, having quality relationships. Yes, conflict is a part of that, but it doesn't have to reach a level where it disturbs our own peace. And sometimes we have to withdraw for a moment, but regroup, right? And come back to the table and figure out how we still move forward as friends or those valued relationships.
Correct.
So, on that note, let's quickly introduce ourselves. Mom,
Anna,
my tia,
Laura.
and I'm Joanna. And we want to remind you, whether it's good, bad, or funny,
live
live
it
it
Live
up.
up.
it up.